All right, we're up and running. Oh, well, I have to reframe my video. It's just not in the right position. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show. It's Hal Sparks Mornings, Megaworldwide. Good to see you. Phil Bittner will be joining us for hour 2, but for the time being, it's just the two of us. How's everybody doing this morning? We've got, let's see, Jake Tapper is just trying to milk as much money as he can before CNN producers beholden to Trump give him the boot. Maybe so. Fika sends his regards. It's true. What's happening, Katrina in Manchester, England? Hi, everybody. Like, subscribe, etc., all the stuff I have to say to get you people to subscribe to the channel. By God and by golly. Hi, Georgina. What's happening? Had a lovely... YouTube should be up and running. We should be good. Is there not a... I'll check that just to make sure. It should be up and... Yep, we're streaming on YouTube. We're good on Facebook. We're up on Twitch, and nobody gives a shit about Rumble, but I think that's actually happening. So I'm still in LA, and I will be doing my afternoon show here, and then I'm going to drive back tonight because now that I have a setup here that's at least rudimentary in its ability to stream compared to my home setup, I shouldn't have to burn myself down getting home to do the show because I can at least do the guests here like I wanted, and the internet quality is much better. So, show last night was lovely. It was a great time. Yeah, just overall really good people and great music and super fun and yeah, there you go. Howdy, Pokey, what's happening? Hi, Linda, good to see you. Jonathan, 56 Nick Rich, what's happening? Working great since the... Yeah, okay, good. YouTube is working great since the intro to help borrow Trump's orange makeup. No, it's the saturation on this camera. I have a choice. I can either... Well, here you go. If I turn it down like that, this thing goes from like normal skin color to black and white with like 2 notches. I'm working on it. I'll replace it later. It's not that big a deal. All right. Lots of stuff to cover today. Well, we'll get to Balochistan in a moment. I don't know if you guys know about the Balochistan. Do you guys know about Balochistan? No, I have not spray tan for the show. It's just the tint of the camera. But I'm not against it. How when you fly, please stay safe. I'm driving, so there you go. What are you driving? A Tesla? No, a Toyota. How would you ever film more lab rat seasons? Yes. So, yay, we're live on Rumble. God help us. So that all the Iranian bot farms can watch the show. Hi, guys. Okay. There's way too much. So Trump's basically like his grifting tour of the Middle East is going gangbusters. He and his family are doing, he's like flying in, glad-handing, and then the rest of the family, namely Jared and Don Jr., are flying up and doing cleanup and adding these, these business deals on top of the other stuff that's going on. And in a lot of ways, they're dealing with the reality of the new Middle East, which is as the world moves away, whether anybody likes it or not, from oil and gas as our primary source of transportation fuel, there is going to be a major shift in the economic fates and the winds of change blowing through the Middle East. And everybody knows this. There's no way around it. It's just, everybody can see the trajectory. We're all moving towards, more than likely, as nuclear will be the main way we fund AI. Along with that will come an expansion of the energy grid, which was how people will charge their vehicles, along with solar and other stuff. As that gets better and better, and as battery capacity gets longer than gasoline, and charging takes even less time, you're going to see a shift, and they all know it. The Saudis know it. I know it. Your wife knows it. Dogs know it. But this is part of their kind of cleanup. The Saudis especially have been shifting their entire, business model for Saudi Arabia away from oil for a little while now, and turning it basically into a must-have Muslim tourist destination, as at some point everybody has to make the trip to Mecca and Medina. So counting on that, that's about 1 billion people that have to come through at some point in their life. Many people will make the trip second or third time. Maybe they will stay if they're reasonable and they have a business, and so therefore you offer tax incentives. So you create basically the goal of MBS is to turn Saudi Arabia into a giant Cayman Islands, if that makes sense. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Yeah, well, not hot swappable batteries might be a thing, but speed charging will also be a thing. So, anyways, everyone but the culty morons. Yes. Welcome to everyone but the culty morons. How can anyone not see what a traitor Trump is? What more proof do people need? Well, Georgina, it's funny that you bring that up because it turns out that maggots across the board are quite concerned at this point that that Trump may not be on the team. Yeah. Now, it's little things that are chipping away at it, not the least of which is the Qatari airplane is definitely a MAGA sticking point. And even Bloomberg's writing articles this morning about how it's like like the CIA, the intelligence agency's like nightmare scenario, because he has no idea how easy it is to set up spying devices in a complex device like an airplane in the first place, which is why it costs so much for Boeing to make it, not because it costs that much to make an airplane. Because, again, this is the problem with having a businessman in positions of power, especially ones that don't have any proprietary secrets. There's no secret to Trump's success. It's all bullshit and it's all up front. So he has no idea how to protect the business secrets of his company, nor would he. So he has no experience with corporate espionage that would key him to maybe the potential problems with getting a free airplane from somebody. Lord Almighty. So yes, and the company was a hand-me-down from his dad. He's a second-generation rich kid, and all he did was take that real estate company and turn it into a holding company and a branding company, which is failing. So Glenn Beck is still trying to defend the airplane bribe. Of course he is. He can't not, Doc. That's the thing. There's no way around this for these jerkweeds. They what are they going to do? Come out against it in any serious way? Now, Laura Loomer, because she has leverage, and apparently Trump is of the mind that she knows something he doesn't, which is fucking bizarre, she's leading this thing where everybody flipped out because, dear God, let's see if they show the actual, where is it? Do they show the actual one? Okay. Anyways, so they, on the GOP's Twitter account, the one that's run by Mike Johnson's team, they wrote a thing like, everybody wants to support the hard work of, House Republicans believe in every American's potential to thrive by embracing the power of work, which is like an anti-welfare statement, just standard Republican blather. But they also translated it into Spanish in the same tweet. So in the same message, they did it in English and Spanish, and you can imagine how calmly and resolutely and softly and joyfully that was absorbed by the maggot world. So Rep. Brandon Gill from Texas goes, is this a joke, House GOP? We're in America. We represent Americans. We don't pander in foreign languages. Speak English. And that guy's from Texas. So everybody on his staff speaks Spanish. Otherwise, he'd never get elected. He took a swipe at another post. Press 2 for English is a losing message at House GOP. Why is the House GOP tweeting in Spanish? This is America, right? We speak English here. Trump's favorite right-wing agitator, Laura Loomer, fumed. President Trump has literally signed English language executive orders. What the hell is the GOP doing? Oh, hold on. Let me clear this out of the way so you guys can see. Tarrant County Republican Chair Beau French asks, what the holy hell is this? Why isn't this all in English? That's just magic. Okay. And this is kind of standard Republican silly fare, right? Like watching them panic over they accuse the House UP of virtue signaling. Then English is the official language of our country. Stop virtue signaling by writing in Spanish. This account is a joke. Also, if House Republicans want to embrace the power of work, then they should show up to work and stop taking vacations. Oops. Shot across the bow at the House rules under Mike Johnson that they've set up so they don't have to do any work. They're starting to notice. Orrin McIntyre, is that the dude who works with? Is it one of the derelicts on Pat Gray's show? All the guys who look like they sleep under the studio. Whoever's operating this account should be fired immediately. I don't care. And then, yeah, I mean, on and on and on. Like it was fast and furious, and it wasn't just rando accounts. These are not like, totally American user John Plumber 12791776 says, don't use Spanish. These are the serious members of the cheerleading squad for MAGA having a problem. Now, this is on the minor end. On the other side of things, let me see if yeah. On the other side, this is the problem they're running into with Trump's big, beautiful bill. And there's a lot of issues with it, obviously. Number one should be clear to everyone that this bill will be thousands of pages. And Republicans allegedly used to hate bills that were thousands of pages, if we're not mistaken. By the way, feel free to super chat and all that kind of stuff. Become a member, patreon.com. All the information is down below. It's going by or whatever. And today's a great day to do a 666 super chat because, I'm going to buy 666 Fifth Avenue. I'm going to need your help. So, do you have any clips of Trump speaking English, by the way? No, I don't. I don't know what language he speaks. I think it's from Oxygen Depravistan. That's his country of birth. So there's a bunch about this that is obvious hypocrisy. And you and I both know I could fill this entire show all day with, oh my God, the hypocrisy. They always complain about this, and yet when they get in power, they do, right? Okay. And boy, do I have a video this afternoon from the New York Times that just pissed me the fuck off. Don't get me started. I'll deal with it this afternoon. Jesus. So, but here's the thing. So, number one, nobody's going to have time to read this whole bill by the time it's done. They're going to go through it in committee like every other bill and pretend like nobody does. So why bother? And they're going to pass this giant bill, or they're going to try. I don't think they have the votes. It's very hard to imagine them getting all the votes for this at this point. They certainly don't have any Democratic votes. They're certainly not going to have any Democratic Senate votes. So the problem they have is not with Democrats, because we're in the minority right now. Thanks, people who didn't show up and are like, I don't know. This is the thing. Modeling from the Tax Foundation. This is the part that stood out to me right here. Let's see if I scroll this up. Modeling from the Tax Foundation, a right-leaning think tank, finds that positive effects on GDP from the House legislation would be roughly offset by the negative impact from the new tariffs. That's right. The stunting of growth, which is how we're going to get out of all this, right? The stunting of growth, which will be caused by the tariffs, and the guaranteed inflationary impacts of it, which is 10% across all imported goods, which will lead to at least a 2.5% inflation growth in regular items, because as prices rise and people's willingness to pay for those things, other sellers will raise the prices of their things because the competition window of how much you're paying for what goes up. This, honest to God. So This is just adorable. Congressional Republicans are looking to encourage growth by incentivizing business investment while also honoring Trump's campaign trail promises for new tax breaks for individuals, while also cutting spending and limiting the damage to the U.S. fiscal picture. This is there's a word for this. It's impossible. Yeah, you can't. You've got to make a choice at some point that's going to be bad. It's going to, you can't do all of it at once. Something's going to suffer, and they know this. So the sale on this thing, again, the best thing that can happen right now is that in committee, and this is what's occurring, is that Republicans start having to put pen to paper and proving their shit, because Trump could tell everybody he had a big, beautiful health care bill until it came time to actually draft one, and then poof, nothing. The chances of that we have another CR sometime around September gets higher by the day. All right, on top of this, one way to finesse, oh boy, those trade-offs is to offer tax breaks that expire in a few years, which lessens their fiscal hit on paper, at least. And again, this is how they got it through the first fucking time. And Trump wants it permanent. Otherwise, why are you doing this? Okay. Obviously, because it's a bailout. These people are just bailing on America. Yet it sets up a fiscal cliff down the road, like it did last time, as future Congress must either extend them or allow them to expire, creating a tax hike, which is not what it does. It just is a temporary pause. It's a coupon. It's a tax coupon. You're offering a tax coupon. It's not a tax hike in a few years if it goes back to where it was. It's a technique used by both parties, including Trump's 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and Biden's administration's American Rescue Plan, which temporarily extended the child tax credit. Now, can anybody see what's wrong with this statement? Besides the fact that Biden's temporary expanding of the child tax credit would have been a permanent thing, except Republicans stopped it. Democrats want to expand the child tax credit and keep it there. You know why? Because people are always making new fucking children. The child tax credit, no matter how much you expand it, only applies to the people that are currently having kids, and small kids at that. It is limited in scope, and it is specific to a group of people that will fluctuate over time. And if you're trying to, raise the number of people that are having babies, one of the ways you do that is you offset some of the costs of having a child in modern times versus what it was like to have like 9 of them, like the Kennedys, where if 2 of them got fucking measles and kicked off, you could go, well, how many do you need, really? The idea that this is at all comparable between the 2017 tax tax break that Trump wanted to do, and the fact that in that particular case, the ones for individuals were temporary, but the ones for corporations were permanent, and that they're trying to use that basically as a think of it as their own version of the debt ceiling. Okay, so Republicans did this on purpose. There's a chance that if they'd have moderated it, not given as big a corporate tax cut, they could have gotten a permanent middle class tax cut through, almost completely bipartisan. Could have happened, but then they wouldn't be able to use it as a reason for themselves to get elected in cycles. If we don't get back in, the Democrats are going to do this, and you're going to lose your tax break. It's a feature, not a bug, that it's not permanent. Yeah. So whereas the Biden administration's rescue plan, they wanted a permanent expansion of the child tax credit, couldn't get it. Do you think if Biden and Harris had gotten in, they had a Democratic House and a Democratic Senate, we'd see that expansion? Of course we would. No question. So if you think that's a good thing, then I guess you still think the the choice between Trump and Harris was a coin flip if you voted that way. So there's a bunch of stuff they're trying to throw in there, which is very much towards like Trump wants people to be able to take their business buddies golfing and write it off. That's where he's going with what he wants from it. And it's really all he's paying attention to. So, but the tariffs themselves are what's screwing them because, and I've said this a bunch of times, and we need to beat this into the sort of the mainstream conversation about this. The tariff, the entirety of Trump's tariff issue, his tariff plan, and let me bring the chat room in on this. The entirety of Trump's tariff fixation is, where is it? Do I not have I have a chat in here, don't I? I'm missing it. Where are we? Oh, there it is. Thank you. I don't know why that was so hard. That, and let's scroll this over here. There you go. The whole reason for Trump's tariff fixation is a return to the robber baron tax policies of the late 1800s, early 1900s. And the purpose of that is to shift the tax burden from the biggest taxpayers in dollar amount, not percentage, but dollar amount, the rich, to the poor, so that you guys pay it in the cost of everyday goods. And that does two things. One, it eliminates the tax burden of the rich and it passes that on to you. But it also makes sure that the things that you want in life, the things that have made your life more comfortable, have made you more viable in business and all these other things like computers and televisions and all those kind of things, and a better car that doesn't break down, all those things that people have been slowly but surely able to afford at a higher clip across, a large swath of the economic spectrum, that makes you competitive against them. You have these nicer things and you don't have to pay as much for them. You got a little money left over, send your kid to school. And between that and Pell Grants and other stuff, ta-da, now Don Jr. and the Erics of the world have to compete against these middle class and poor kids who are going to university, and they got to put a stop to that because their kids cannot compete. And they don't want that. So that's the issue. That's what this is all about. The tariff thing has very little to do with just we need to take in money. The tariff thing is 100% with shifting the tax burden from the government to the people. And by the way, in all these countries where they have tariffs, they're doing the same thing, especially, by the way, places like England and other countries that have a national health care service. So what's happened is if they had to pay the overall taxes for all the stuff in terms of income tax, the cost of their health care plan is so expensive that to add the other stuff to it would make an intolerable structure. So what they do is they tax people to pay for the health care system, and then they offset the cost of city services and all that other stuff through VAT taxes and fees. And they downplay it so it's passed on to the consumer, the person, the individual in those countries. So they play fast and loose with this as well. And Trump is basically taking a note out of theirs, but without the guaranteed services, while eliminating the potential for a national healthcare service or FEMA or those kind of things, because he has to make his tax cut economically feasible, because we're never going to take in enough tariffs to do this. And if there was ever an embargo, if somebody just sank ships or stopped sending them, the goods would stop flowing in. It's one of the reasons we got away from the tariff system, was because if at some point your country gets surrounded and you can't get goods in the country, you also lose your tax base at the same time. If your tax base is internally built, then you have a reason to build your economy internally. If it's not, then why would you ever? And you have the resource curse, which is why a lot of countries that don't have a sound income stream from their tax base, why they could be easily cut off from the rest of the world and it screws their entire economy. Imagine if what happened with PPE during COVID happened to actual cash in the country, right? So uh, this is make no mistake. The entirety of Trump's purpose in the tariff thing is not to make America great again or make America rich again, or because it's a great stream of wealth, because they wiped out basically, somewhere between $4 and $6 trillion worth of wealth in this stupid misadventure. And he's had to dial all of them back anyways. And there's not going to be enough coming in to cover the loss of taxes, but he's trying to do it in a bunch of different ways so that he can get this giant tax cut. That's all this is about. And they're going to raise the debt ceiling about $5.6 trillion, so he never has to go back and point out the fact that their deficits are climbing. The deficit is up this year. It's up $300 million. Now people are saying, how? But government spending's only up $150 billion. So how can it be up 300? Because according to Doge, they've cut $150 billion, right? Isn't there $150 billion worth of savings? Didn't Elon Musk say that himself? Didn't Doge say that themselves, right? $150 billion, which means if spending is up 150 and they've saved 150, it didn't zero it out, which means spending is up $300 billion year over year over 2024 spending. Make sense? Good. Okay. Now, the announced trade deal, the I don't even know if it's the trade conversation that's going to continue with other conversations. Which can we also address? I love you guys. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Outlive Trump. That's a brilliant way of looking at it, Lisa. Thank you very much. Sandy says, thanks for making this less painful. I try. Oh my gosh. Joy, thank you for that, for the help me buying 666 Fifth Avenue. And I know a lot of people are like, Hal, there's no way you could afford 666 Fifth Avenue. Well, neither could Jared, and that never stopped him. So thanks very much. I'm going to keep trying. So if you want to help, feel free to super chat or become a Patreon or any of those things. We're going to do it at some point. And again, if at any time I am able to buy 666 Fifth Avenue, we're going to convert 2 floors in it. We're going to give them free to the Carter Foundation to run Habitat for Humanity out of it and turn it into a greater organization, even that it already is. That's my pledge to you. So that said, in the meantime, it keeps the lights on and keeps some food in my belly and clothes on my kids' back. So thank you. So one of the things about these trade talks is that they're talks on top of trade talks on top of talks. So just like Trump's executive orders that are non-binding blather, these agreements that he's signing are the same. Like, there are concessions from the United States that he's giving away in the Middle East right now that are immediate, that are not predicated on the investment from these countries happening immediately. That down the line, they're pledging these things over the next few years, and so they'll seed in $100 million, which is nothing for them, on a promise of $20 billion or $100 billion or $500 billion or whatever it is, and then that never has to come. That it never actually has to occur. That never. And God knows what they would actually be doing in that. It's just kind of money investment, blah, for everything, for jobs and money. But they don't actually have to do it before they get the payoff from the United States, especially when it comes to eliminating sanctions or what have you. So, okay, when it comes to China and Hassan Abi's favorite slave trade. No, don't get me wrong. I think he likes several countries that engage in slavery, but in particular, it seems lately he's really up in Xi Jinping's grill about how wonderful slavery is and its economic potential in terms of Xinjiang cotton and re-education camps. By the way, has anybody looked to see if that dickhead has looked up the re-education chairs that they put the Xinjiang prisoners and other Chinese people, including Jack Ma, in the re-education chairs? It's a lovely little contraption. It would make Torquemada proud. So this is the issue that Trump is dealing with this China deal stuff. And this is why Besson is stammering all over the fucking place, and why Jameson Greer is drinking a shit ton of water. Every time Besson is talking, you just see like Jameson Greer doing this kind of like getting a little dry. And that's because the damage is largely done, and it'll even if you rescinded all of it, it would take a while for the cycle damage to work its way through the system, the delays and the other stuff that happened. And yet there is still a 10/20/35% tariff on everything except certain things, which are not basically consumer goods, unless it's everything with a circuit board in it, which seemed to be the question, but I don't know how you ascertain that, because Kristi Noem said last week that they don't scan most of the things coming in at the ports. So how the fuck do you know? But central bank can't rescue the economy quickly, with the White House pursuing inflationary trade policies. There it is, ladies and gentlemen. Inflationary trade policies. There is no two ways about it. Tariffs are inflationary. That's the fucking point. All right. Why can China sell? All right, shit. Hold on. Let me bring this in. Let me bring it home. Come here, Francine. Listen. What's the point of a tariff? A company has a super widget, and they make the super widget over there. Now we have super widgets over here, or we make them and then sell them or whatever, but we want to make super widgets here in the United States. But because we have better labor practices, because we have OSHA, because people, if you want to keep an employee for a period of time, you got to offer them benefits and and wages, especially the more complicated the super widget is, right? But China doesn't have to worry about that shit, so they can sell it for 10% of the price, because all that labor stuff off the table when you're enslaving Uyghurs and making them screw these fucking screws in. Boy, that's cheaper than automation, because if it breaks down, you just chuck them out a fucking window and move somebody else in. So the other country undersells that thing, and the American one is expensive, but the other market is this cheap. So let's say the whole purpose is to equalize the price. Now, this company in America might have been artificially dampening their price to get even within the competition window with the undercut, the lower income country, the developing country that's flooding the market with these things. So they're already squeezing their margin as small as they can to try and have some semblance of business, while this other country is undermining the trade. This is the worst case scenario. This is how Trump and them present it. So they're selling it for 10%, of what everybody else is paying. The U.S. company, because you've got to provide, you have to have workman's comp, you have to put into Social Security. There's all these things that raise the cost of that labor and the materials. Maybe you have to get them from someplace else, all that kind of stuff. Or you have to assemble those things. So this is what they're competing against. And the point of a tariff is to raise the price of the other foreign good to an equal point, so they're at least on a even playing field, or raise it so it is prohibitively expensive, so the U.S. version is cheaper by comparison, and yet it is still 90% more expensive than the original version. So let's say you were doing the squeezed version, or you were buying the cheap knockoff. Now, at the very least, the cheap knockoff is the same price as the squeezed margin, which means what? The American company doesn't have to squeeze their margin anymore. And if you jack the price up entirely, which is effectively the embargo that we had, then the American company can actually pad it a little bit if they want to expand, which they could not do before because they were competing against somebody that was undermining labor standards. And so they couldn't possibly expand their market because they were squeezed by this possibility. But no matter what, even when it's positive, happens for steel, this happens for appliances. When there's dumping of appliances, you got an American washing machine company and you got a Korean or a Chinese one, and they're undercutting the price of it, and you're trying to sell more of these fucking things, and these guys, we can't compete with the labor costs of this country, and material one to one, the aluminum costs the same. It's bought on the open market, but assembling the fucking thing, we've got to pay all these other things, and they don't give a shit. So you put a tariff on it, and it evens it up, and now people can choose which one they like better, right? That seems to be the normal use of it. But what they're doing is they're jacking this part up because they want to incentivize the building over here. So you have to go higher. That's what this whole thing is. So, and again, this is only, the whole purpose of this is not to save industry in the United States, but to shift the tax burden to the consumer during his presidency. He didn't give a rat's ass if this pays off. But that's what you use tariffs for. You balance out that trade. And then what happens is the company that was artificially pushing their price down because they were competing in such an unfair market against a foreign supplier with no labor laws and no environmental regulations and all this other shit gets to add a little bit to their price. Not much, probably 2 or 3% to make up for the fact that they have been squozed for so long. It's inflationary. Even if it's good, it's going to be inflationary. Does that clarify this stuff a little bit, chat room? I don't know why, this is not even a question. What happened? Oh, sorry. Hassan is unfair. Hassan thinks that the people who died on 9/11 had it coming. The people in the building, the janitors and the fucking accountants and the people who worked in real estate firms. Not the owner of the company; those were largely out of the building, right? But everybody else, had to take one for the team. Fuck that guy. But the point I'm trying to make is that even when tariffs are good and completely necessary, they are inflationary at their root. So you either can admit that and go, look, this is inflationary. This is going to raise prices, but in the long run, you're buying a better quality product that will last longer. You get what you pay for. And by not, getting, focusing on, things are so cheap that if it breaks, you just throw it out and get a new one. You now have, you buy tools that are, like Craftsman that are guaranteed for life, right? That's in theory the goal. But whatever your goal is, whatever it is, it's going to be inflationary. It is going to raise prices. And anybody who says that it isn't is selling something. Lutnick was out of the building that day. True story. Exactly. That's kind of what I was. So his voters don't even bother looking up the definition of tariff. They're not going to have to. You know why? Because it's coming to a Walmart near them, kids. Nobody gives a shit whether these people knew last year. I mean, we're all aggravated by it because it's fairly obvious, but nobody gives a shit if these folks understand that tariffs are a tax on the consumer. Because they're gonna find out. They're going to find out. And again, hey, we told you so. We tried to warn you, right? And it's going to affect them worse than anybody. That's the thing. there was a, let's see if I can find this real quick. Where is it? It was literally, yeah, where's this? There was an article in, was it Axios? I don't remember. Like this big pushback from maggots about I was reading so much stuff this morning. My brain gets fried with trying to keep track of where where is it? That effectively the issues with FEMA is that there's this bipartisan group, right? There's this bipartisan group that is pushing back on what Trump wants to do with FEMA. Well, no shit. Democrats push back on it. Why? Because we care. Because we understand that impoverished states cannot handle, a massive tornado or a hurricane or something like that. And the people that get hit the worst are the people who don't have insurance or live in trailer parks and stuff like that, are the forgotten masses that vote for Trump and think he believes in them and think one day they want low taxes because they think one day they're going to win the lottery and they don't want the government to take half their shit, when they on that big day, right? But Democrats, I don't need somebody to believe what I believe politically for me to not want them to drown in a fucking mudslide or die in a house full of black mold because they can't afford to move. Right? So Democrats want FEMA to function for the good of all Americans and for the value of the organization. FEMA's not supposed to, well, I was about to say FEMA's not supposed to turn a profit, but it is in human lives and well-being. The profit of a government is the quality of life of the citizenry. That's how you judge it. And it's not going to be even. There's going to be income inequality across the functionality of government because you can't save everybody all the time, and all you can do is do your best, and you're going to be putting out multiple fires, and government when it's running smoothly is plate spinning, and when it's not, it's plate spinning in a windstorm. Nobody wins an election. You get a job that you have to do. So, but the Republicans, the reason, they're all of a sudden like, holy shit, we need FEMA, is because they know these states cannot afford to protect themselves on their own. They know that blue states pay for them. They know that, Chicago and LA and Seattle and San Francisco and New York, the money made in those cities cascades across the entire country and makes up for the lack of funds and ingenuity and entrepreneurship in these podunk fucking places that are like shaking their fist at big government until a big wind comes. That's why they're worried now. Because it sounds like a great game, Like I don't understand how these assholes became mad at FEMA like it was, the FBI during Waco or some shit. But that's where we are currently. But their leadership, their mayors, their senators, their House members, as maggoty as they love to get, are all of a sudden going, whoa, 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 whoa. Okay, we need that program. Okay, we need this program as well. I mean, you can't cut Medicaid expansion in my state. We need to cut it in these big urban areas because there's this idea that black people, which are, less than 12% of the population, which means less than 6% of the population go anywhere near over the course of their lifetime welfare or Medicaid or food stamps or emergency disaster relief or any of that kind of stuff. Whereas all of West Virginia swamps the Medicaid needs of every black person in the country. Certainly Louisiana, certainly Mississippi, right? Jesus. So, hold on, let me see, yeah. There is, let me see if I can bring this up real quick. And Phil's going to join us in a couple minutes from Kyiv. There we go. Yeah. One of the biggest problems they have right now across maggot land, and this should be no surprise, this is simply this guy. Him and MBS and all the business that they're going to be doing afterwards. And by the way, if you don't think these things are going to become fucking targets after Trump is either out of office or gone, every Trump building in the world is going to have a fucking bullseye on it. Like, it's a little stupid. I mean, that's why they have to build them only in the heart of these like heavily policed states. It's one of the reasons why you can only build buildings in places like Dubai or you know, like in Bangladesh or something like that. It's places where there's effectively a police state around the major hubs to protect his shit. Do you guys know about Balochistan? So, I don't know if you know this, but half of Pakistan just declared itself an independent country from the rest of Pakistan and is asking for UN troops to come in. Now, this is just like in the last 48 hours. It's Baloch, by the way, not Belak. Belak. Balochistan, Pakistan's largest province by area, was once part of the princely state of Kalat before being annexed by Pakistan in 1948. This, you know where this is? I'll only see where the map is. That's where it is. Check that shit out. So it's not, here's India on the other side of it, right here. On the far over there, Balochistan is on the Iranian-Afghanistan side of this, and Balochistan is trying to align itself with India. What do you think that does to A, the existence of Pakistan, and B, the stability in the region? Now you've got India with an ally that borders Iran. So what's that deal look like? This is, okay, this is, when it was this yesterday, last night? Yeah, 10 hours ago. The Republic of Balochistan has been announced. Began trending on social media after Baloch leaders, including Mir Yar Baloch, this Mir Yar from Balochistan, declared Balochistan's independence from Pakistan. The announcement came amid heightened tensions between India and Pakistan following recent cross-border military operations. Mir Yar Baloch, a known writer and advocate for Baloch rights, issued the declaration through a series of posts on X. He urged the Indian government to allow the Baloch embassy in New Delhi and called on the United Nations to send peacekeeping forces to Balochistan while asking the Pakistani army to withdraw from the region. The announcement followed India's Operation Sindoor. And also, by the way, they are asking the UN to immediately start allocating passports, maybe later. Allocating passports on behalf of Balochistan and give them major loans so they can start their own currency. One of those possible announcement soon. Collapse of the terrorist Pakistan is near. We have claimed our independence, and we request India to allow Balochistan's official office and embassy in New Delhi. We also asked the United Nations to recognize the independence of Balochistan and call on a meeting. Yeah, there we go. There must be a release of billions of funds for currency and passport printing. We also urge the UN to immediately send its peacekeeping missions to Balochistan and ask Pakistan's occupational army to vacate territories, airspace, and the Sea of Balochistan and leave all the weapons and property in Balochistan. Like, drop your shit and split. Holy hell. Also, and you're like, well, what the fuck is Balochistan? Who cares? What is this little Slavic? It's where all the oil, gas, and gold are. Balochistan is the richest most economically viable part of Pakistan. Poof. Yeah. They have issued a symbolic declaration of independence for Pakistan, of course, because they declared open war. There's been a bunch of fighting back and forth between what's called the BLA, the Balochistan Liberation Army, and the Pakistani army. There's been, allegations of systematic rape by the Pakistani military against women in the Balochistan region. Here we go. The Balochistan Liberation Army, designated a terrorist organization by Pakistan, claimed responsibility for 71 coordinated attacks across 51 locations in recent days. That was in less than a week, by the way. This Operation Hair-Off stuff that they're talking about. 71 attacks in 51 locations in a week. Now, I mean, and again, do you or I know if the BLA will be decent members of international society or anything like that, or a great idea to run that area? No. Will they even be able to manage it or keep it if they did get that? Nope. I don't know. Neither do they. I mean, there's a whole lot of hope so in this particular situation. Phil is waiting in the wings. Let me bring him in. And we will let's see. There we go. Where is it? Well, let's go into nope. Hold on. Go to here. There we go. And I've got to put Phil in this window, and we'll bring him in just 1 second. Phil, can you hear me okay, by the way? I don't hear you. Okay, so you're muted. There we go. We'll bring you in here. There he is. I hear you. Great. Sounds good. Hi.
Hey,
So I was just talking about this Balochistan business. I don't know if you've heard about this yet, but about 10 hours ago, the biggest province in Pakistan declared its independence from Pakistan. It's Balochistan of Pakistan is opposite to India. And
yeah.
I don't know like how familiar you are with that part of the world. I know you've dealt with, especially around Afghanistan and others. And then this whole thing with Trump's, wanting to make an Iran deal, which sounds more and more like he's trying to be friendly with Putin and do Putin a solid with Iran by giving them a break, so that once they leave sanctions behind, or they eliminate those sanctions, he'll be able to, Iran will be able to trade and get military stuff directly from them. You know what I mean? Like, they'll be allowed to buy from Iran openly, which will, you know what I mean? Like,
Well, the Baluch are ethnically pretty independent of Pakistan,
right.
and I mean they have been for a while. Pakistan it's a conglomeration of a lot of different ethnic groups, and
Right.
so they always have this constant problem with whether it's the Baluch or it's Kashmir or the
Mm-hmm.
frontier or all sorts of different kind of parts of
Right.
Pakistan is not a
It's like
homogeneous
Afghanistan.
nation.
No, it's
Well,
tribal, right?
it's the same thing.
Right.
It's the exact same thing because it's a legacy of partition on the subcontinent. So when Britain left uh, abruptly in '46, they had a massive. There was this massive kind of like, who are we? What are we? It's the
Right.
same thing that happened earlier in the century, in the 20th century, when you had Sykes-Picot and the collapse of empire. Uh,
Right.
in the Arabian Peninsula. It all these arbitrary imperial
Mm-hmm.
holdings that were kind of divided up when various empires in Sykes-Picot was French and British
Yeah.
and Ottoman, and in the subcontinent um, it was the dissolution of imperial the Raj basically,
Right.
um, and so Pakistan more so than India um, had to deal with a lot of kind of different ethnic groups that made up their country. So for Baluchistan to kind of seek independence, much like Kashmir,
Yeah.
it should come to no surprise to anybody.
Yeah, and like the beyond the Sykes-Picot, there was also the lines drawn by the Bell maps. Gertrude Bell being a famous like British spy and diplomat. I mean a tough woman slept in her own guest house for a decade at her house because she figured somebody was going to come kill her, and she basically said, "I don't want them to kill my family. If they come for me, they'll just get me," was the idea. And she drafted the maps that now give us the lines that are Iraq and Iran and most of the Middle East, including what was effectively the British protectorate of
Also, the
Palestine.
creator of the dog bag,
The what?
the dog bag, doggy bag.
Oh, yeah? Oh, taking a doggy bag with
She
you from a
created the
restaurant?
doggy bag.
Right.
If you leave a restaurant and you haven't finished your meal and you ask for a doggy bag, that is because of Gertrude Bell. Gertrude Bell used to go to the Savoy. Was it the Savoy or was it another?
Hmm.
Was it the anyhow one of the great London kind of tea kind of places
Hmm.
where you could go and have British tea,
Right.
which would include cakes and all that. She's the one that
Sure.
created the. I only
The
know
idea
that
of,
because I know her. I know her great grand son.
right. Oh, you know him personally?
Yeah.
Oh,
He
wow.
used to go
So,
to. He used to when I lived in London. He would go to my local in
oh, wow.
Knightsbridge. Yeah. He was her great grandson, and
Right.
he subsequently did because of his holdings, his family holdings. They would have Rusty Trombone
Hmm. Yeah.
would would hold his holistic,
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
peace and love festivals.
Yeah.
And he had
His little
Gertrude
fail
Bell's
cult with a
great guns.
yeah, his
Kind of
little
a
cult with his
yeah,
failure to launch issue. Right.
yeah. Gertrude Bell's great grandson, who kept much of her property and was part of the aristocracy in Britain, used to come to my local pub when I lived in Kensington,
Right.
and tell me stories of his great grandmother, and part of that is the doggy bag. She was the
Right.
creator of the doggy bag.
Yeah. So she was a tough broad, by all
She was
measures.
crazy. Oh, she was
Yeah.
crazy. She was
Yeah.
one of these great. She was one of these kind of great imperial eccentrics
Yeah.
who did all kinds of nutty stuff. And she was the first woman to actually attend a Hajj
Hmm.
in Saudi Arabia and go to Mecca.
Hmm.
But it was all imperialism. So the reason why
Yeah.
it's relevant is because of kind of her, yeah, the Gertrude Bell uh,
Mm.
map
Yeah.
that she created that kind of in the end became how they divided up empire in a
Right.
post-imperial world. Yeah.
Right. And especially
Which is why we have Pakistan and India and all that shit.
right.
And yeah.
Why they are the way they are and why where the borders are and all that kind of stuff was established in these maps. And she was, she ended up like she lived a long life or whatever. She ended up taking herself out in the end because she was so sickly and frail that she ended up she had malaria a couple times because she was, I mean, she was
Hmm.
just she would travel through these areas. She would, she would confront these like patriarchal warlords that ran all these tribes as a woman from the north, which was fucking crazy.
Well, she was
Like,
British. She
yeah,
was the white woman. She was the
yeah,
white woman, so she was untouchable.
right. And
It
she
was not.
died
It
in
was. It was
Baghdad.
empire.
Yeah, she died in
Yeah.
Baghdad.
Yeah.
So
British
famously
Empire.
Babylonia, but yeah, but so these lines that we're talking about and their creation of them, especially in like you can make an argument that the Ottoman Empire's lines, which they kind of piggybacked on, or the Roman lines, which they piggybacked on for the area around Israel in large part, which again, the Romans named Palestine for the Philistines and was, basically a way of, you know,
Hmm.
subverting like the Jews that were there because it was, Christianity versus Judaism in it, in a cage match at that time. But those lines had been kind of, there was some level of understanding like this mountain range is basically you go over that hill and that's a different group of people and that kind of so they were kind of based on something in the Indian Pakistan area. It was just kind of like, all right, fuck it, everybody this way that way, everybody this way that way, and it was just like all done. And it was real, especially in the western part of the country, very awkward. And I would argue that Afghanistan was really not about a country starting. The border of Afghanistan is the end of the livable territory that what became Pakistan and parts of Iran and stuff. Like nobody goes past that point. You can't live out
Well,
there. It's terrible.
yeah. I mean, that's all. That's all partition.
Right.
That's what the legacy of partition is atrocious. It's
Yeah.
1.3 million people died in partition,
Hmm.
and that's
Yep.
nobody's going to know for sure what the actual numbers were, but over a million people died in partition when the
Right.
British left, and the subcontinent was divided between um, Islam and Hindu, and then you have, in addition to that, um, the tribal areas where you get into. I mean, like, look, I lived in Afghanistan.
Right.
It's beautiful, but it's inhospitable. It's these
Right.
massive, hill ranges, and it's all legacy of empire. And so I mean, even the issues that we're having currently between Pakistan and India are a result of partition. And so it's, all of this kind of stuff.
Right.
The legacy of all of it is coming to,
Coming home to roost.
yeah, coming to, pay us all a visit, in the current ages when, this stuff has been going on for quite some time. So, you know, uh, it's not just Kashmir; it's partition.
Right.
And the trauma
Well,
that left behind.
sure. I mean, I don't think there's a way of I mean, you have centuries of warlords establishing the boundaries of their own country, which is there are none. It's as much land as we can take. And so there's no like, okay, you have to stop here, which is the purpose of borders in a Western sense, is the legal thing. Like your country ends
Yeah,
there. Whereas
yeah,
the warlords in that area is my country is as far as I can push that line was the idea.
yeah.
And so this push back and forth between the two created
Well, it's
what is
tribalism.
yeah, right. And so it's hard for them. There is no way of mapping that out because, like a caliphate or something, the whole purpose is eventually the Ruski Mir. It's the same thing as Russia. It's the same like our
Yeah.
border is as far as we can push it. It has nothing to do with what you want about your country. It's what you can keep, and that's where that whole like it's a great democracy is a great thing if you can keep it. When it comes to
Well, you
Russia.
see it. You see it in Europe clearly with
Hmm.
geographical things that defined it. define it by like rivers or hills or what have you.
Hmm.
In Arabia, it is Sykes-Picot, which is
Yeah.
arbitrary, and it's
Right.
just guys with maps and rulers and kind of. And then in the subcontinent, you're spot on there. It is literally as far as I can exert my power.
Yeah.
And when the subcontinent was split up after empire, it was really just like whose fiefdom
Yeah.
is,
Right.
however far I can exert my power, and and also religion and things like that. But yeah, it's messy. It's messy
Yeah.
when it comes
Well,
to
it's like the,
that
I mean,
part of the world.
arguably the default position is the Mongolian position for that part of the world.
Yeah,
And for a period of time, you could argue that the English kind of took their cues from that kind of an idea, almost in an inversion of the Roman Empire turning into the Catholic Church and expanding itself as empire. But after a while, once trade routes were established, then you rescind backwards. You could like the Qin dynasty was full of that. The original,
mm,
Silk Road was this idea like fight your way out to the edge of where you can't fight anymore. And then you'll develop a trading relationship. And then what's really there is not land you want to keep, but roads you can protect to get the trade from here to
yeah,
you through this area. So the
especially in
expansion,
Central Asia.
yeah, right.
Yeah, especially
So
in Central Asia. Yeah.
yes. So the obviously, I guess the big thing is the negotiations that are coming up between Zelensky and Putin. Allegedly, they're not doing it face to face. It's going to be, I don't know, shuttlecock diplomacy, tap dance
Mm,
diplomacy, tea
yeah, I'll
trade,
believe it when I see it.
exactly. Tea tray diplomacy, which is like put this note on this tray and walk it into the other room. And oh, yeah, well, here's my note. Fuck you. And then the tray goes back. There's a lot of that going on with the Chinese. It was with the Chinese and U.S. trade delegations. It's almost exactly the same thing. And now it's like we will agree to talk at some point in the future when we talk, as long as you give us a huge break on things. China ran away with a bunch of concessions that we did not get in return at all, except cheap goods flowing again in the interim for a short period of time. And that was enough to keep Trump thinking, even if we have a recession, we'll still have some cheap goods to keep the masses, you know, placated through the holidays or whatever, paper plates and firecrackers and maybe toys for Christmas, and that'll keep everybody kind of quiet, even if it's a little more expensive in the interim, because they won't notice the cost of living going up so much. But this back and forth between Russia and Zelensky, and I mean, obviously we'll see, is in the shadow of France and the U.S. talking about a new round of sanctions specifically on Russia. If this, I mean, I think that that 24 hours obviously came and went, or that 12 hours, whatever the window was that France and the
Well,
EU said, right? Um,
oh,
I mean, I don't,
that was performative. That
sure.
was never going to happen.
Right, but I will think that there's a value in that performative aspect, because Russia's been performative in a bunch of this
Yeah,
shit. I mean, I would argue saying they're a bunch of Nazis you're trying to kill in Ukraine is a performance. It's not based on any reality. It's like you're selling a story. But in this particular case, they were like, "We'll give you every chance. We're okay. You want to do a ceasefire? You say you're a part of this process? Okay, cool. We'll get your shit together by the end of day, and we'll start a ceasefire, and then we'll start talking. If you're serious about this, let's fucking do it." And then what happened? Right? Nothing. Because
yeah,
it was always a lie.
of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, uh, Istanbul is nothing will come from Istanbul. It'll be
Right.
um, you know, uh, uh, Zelensky will kind of like say, Kremlin, the Kremlin has to respond. And because we're working on the presidential level, I have to meet with the president of Russia. And unless he shows up, these talks will never happen. They know exactly
Right.
what they're doing. This is, look, it's not, I'm not going to just say, Zelensky has this pass on this thing. He knows exactly what he's doing.
Yes.
He is requesting something of Putin that Putin will never, ever, ever deliver. And
Hmm.
so, but the onus will be on Putin now, uh, certainly for
And
the
the pressure
European
will be on
powers,
Trump.
and the pressure will be on Trump. Yeah.
Right.
And the European powers will be like, hey, look, Zelensky wanted to meet with Putin, knowing
Yep.
full well, I mean, that's what their visit here was on
Yeah.
what, Monday, was it? Um, it's
Right.
the Europeans will now turn around and say, um, uh, we tried to we tried to have a peace process, a negotiation process, and Putin just wouldn't want to come to the table, knowing
Right.
full well that Putin would never come to the table.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a kind of it's a dance, it's a tango,
But a
and
necessary one,
that's
right?
but a necessary one. Sure, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
look, it's well, and those who are critical of European support for Ukraine will have said for months that it's like, well, it's about time.
Yeah.
So they'll do this little thing, and Russia will not go, Putin will not go to Istanbul, and then the European powers will say, well, we tried everything. We were so open to the idea of talks, and clearly Russia was not willing to negotiate. So we're going to give a whole bunch of weapons to Ukraine, and that's what they
Right.
wanted to do anyhow. So it's kind of, yeah,
Yeah.
it's a bit of a
Well,
dance. It's a bit of
yeah.
a
Well,
dance.
but again, I think that dance is necessary to call Trump's bluff. I think that's
Yeah.
really what this is about at this point. That the
Yeah.
Europeans
Yes. Yeah.
and everybody else has got like Trump's like, well, I just want everything to end. Okay, well, if one side, namely the Ukrainians, are coming to the table going, hey, we're here to talk. Well, ceasefire, you want a ceasefire right now while we talk? We're glad to do it. We will put everything on the table and start having a conversation, even if they know, they can't agree to what Putin's saying. They can at least hit those lines that are, giving Trump this kind of out that he keeps asking for if he really wants it. But the reality is that he doesn't. And he's, obviously in the tank for Putin. So it makes it harder and harder more. And like I said, the man has no shame, but you can embarrass him. And at a certain point, that's what that whole like Vlad stop kind of nonsense was about. He felt embarrassed. He can't solve this thing in 24 hours with one fucking phone call. That's never going to happen. He knows that as every day that passes makes him look weaker and lacking control in this situation. He can only blame Biden so much for this kind of shit that he was supposedly selling on the campaign trail he could fix in 24 hours. And then oil prices. So one of the things that he went to Saudi Arabia for, Trump did, was to get them to, even as they ease their restrictions on production, to get them to release even more. He thinks the way he can offset these tariffs and the cost on the consumer is to just drive gas prices to 50 cents a gallon. He thinks that
Right.
if he can do that, then the day-to-day of that will be a wash. People will go, yeah, eggs are 12 bucks a dozen, but gas is 50 cents a gallon. So my budget overall is stretched in it's just in different directions, and that's okay. And at
Well,
least eggs are made with American chickens, right?
right, and hoping that the drop in oil will initiate a drop in logistical costs, which will then initiate a drop in
Other costs.
uh,
Right.
in your day to day costs,
Right.
and it's a sugar high kind of thing.
It's exactly that. Right.
That yeah, you might get a drop in your day to day cost because it doesn't cost as much to move a crate of eggs from wherever to another place because oil is cheaper. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you're still going to get
You're also,
your
as
trade
oil
costs
price
are eventually going to go back up.
And as you're, let's say you're wanting to sell stuff. Oh, we've got a silver alert. There's an old lady who's missing something, missing person. Sorry, this is actually a great thing that LA does. I'm for it. But I don't think she's back here, so I don't. The elder is. But as you lower transportation costs, you also lower the cost of shipping goods to other places. So that entail
Hmm.
raises the price that you can get for goods because while the cost goes down, the profit margin goes up, and therefore you can afford to raise the prices in compensation for whatever that is in the rest of the world. Therefore, the price again it has an inflationary pressure because it's a one-sided area. And right now, oil is at like $63 a barrel. Russia, at bare bones, has a $55 break even.
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing. At this point, because of the number of failed facilities and loss of folks, it's probably closer to 70, let's be honest. Saudi Arabia's break even price is $90 a barrel. They need $100 a barrel to meet their budget deficit. At this point, America, because we're not a resource-based economy as much as Trump wants us to be, like $10 a barrel oil would destroy the U.S. oil market. It would destroy U.S. suppliers and all that kind of stuff. But you'd still be able to buy enough of it because of the strength of the U.S. economy from the rest of the world. So Trump's whole big giving the finger to Venezuela, we'd be buying Venezuelan oil in a fucking second if the price dropped down that much and it cadavered the U.S. market. But the point is that Russia, beyond their break-even price, they still have to fund this war. And they ran through their nest egg maybe a year ago. The rest of these costs and why they went to North Korea, why they've been buying cheap Chinese goods, why they've been buying Iranian Shahed drones, is because they can't afford to make their own shit, even as they're on a war footing. So the question becomes, what, if any, leverage do they have at this point to rebuild or anything? So if it's in for a penny, in for a pound, if you're going through hell, keep going. If you're already fucked, why bother trying to fix it? Is almost the situation that Putin finds himself in. Yeah.
Yeah. No, Putin and Russia are, I mean, even if the oil price does change, they're still so screwed because they've altered their entire economy to a war economy where they have to be
Right.
producing weapons. Um, they're just, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they're to get out of the economic hole they're in is going to take years and years.
Right.
So,
If
you know,
and this is like it's like Japan versus China. China's in a similar situation. I've been talking about this for years. Japan went through hell in the early 90s. But the difference between Japan's collapse of their economy, and as hard as it was, and China's collapsing economy, or Russia's collapsing economy, is that Japan had friends at the end of it. When Japan's economy went in the shitter in the early 90s, other countries rushed in to like help and support them because they were a valuable part of the international community. They weren't fucking with anybody. They were, they had really, especially post World War II, they had righted their ship. If you want to talk about a turnaround from what's effectively, think about like if Iran went through the same kind of change that Imperial Japan went to. And hopefully it wouldn't take 2 nukes, but it seems like that's the way the Trump crowd thinks it's going to happen, is that they're going to use the same medicine for Iran that we used for Japan, is what they think. And Japan's, the end of the emperor and the beginning of a democracy there or whatever was an incredible turn. If you look at Japan previous to that, like the war crimes they were involved in, what they did in Nanjing, how they treated prisoners of war. I mean, it makes North Korea look like a spa in some cases. It was ferociously awful. And now
yeah,
one of the the best countries to travel to and experience life in. It's very forward thinking, if not futuristic, in what they're doing. But they, like I said, they had friends when their economy took a shit and they were in a hole. everybody was glad to help because they'd made a turnaround. Nobody's going to be
Yeah.
there for Russia. And even if they were, they wouldn't trust them enough to do business with them, even if they felt charitable like they did in 91. Why would you go in there and think they're not going to fuck you again? It's weird.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially Russia. I mean, which has a
Right.
history of just, you know, screwing every single partner they ever had.
Right.
So,
Including their own
yeah.
internal partners. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
does the IMF want to get pushed out of a third floor window? I guess is my question.
Well, when you have, hundreds of thousands of people on the streets of Georgia, you have an active war in in Ukraine, trying to push back against Ukrainian Russian Empire. Who wants to expand that empire? Nobody.
Right. Yeah.
So it's just they're not going to. They could have done perhaps in 91 with the collapse of the Soviet Union. They could have gone down a very different road and become internationalists. But what they did was kind of like um,
Hmm.
circle the wagons and just kind of like try and keep this like fragmented empire going instead
Right.
of like being, much more understanding of well, I mean,
Right.
look at the war, the first and the second war in Chechnya. The perfect example of like when they could have perhaps it would have been a stretch, but perhaps could have done some sort of like negotiation uh, because it's also it's not just Chechnya, it's Dagestan, it's Ossetia,
Yeah.
it's the entire Caucasus where
Right.
uh, their empire was very much forced on those native people, or Siberia even, and they didn't do any of that. They didn't even try. So it was we're gonna keep the empire going,
Right.
and now 20, 30 years later, uh the real disintegration of the Russian Empire is almost
Upon us.
inevitable now.
Right.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
almost inevitable.
It's crazy. And then, so the sanctions that they're talking about putting on, there was a bill against these phantom tankers that the EU and the United States are pushing out, which is
Mm,
partly what was going on with the Houthi situation, was that these Russian tankers that were transferring oil to Chinese tankers or vice versa and shipping through that area and trying to circumvent the sanctions, they passed a rule against that and started pushing back, and it had a major effect. But now they're the quote from, let me see if I can find it. The quote from the European Union was, Russia has found ways to circumvent the blockade imposed by Europe and the U.S., and turning off the tap in this way is a way to grab Russia by the throat. Like
yeah.
this is a serious escalation in language from the Europeans that we have not seen in quite a while. And I don't I mean, it's so hard to keep up. But Russia's even been making sort of increasing pushes around, I don't know, like into Chechnya, but controlling Chechnya as if it's starting to, you know, it's hard to get a grasp on whether or not, it's coming loose. But they're certainly tamping down on stuff there more. I mean, where do those troops come from? They come from the front in Ukraine. They come from, right? Um,
Well, yeah, and how are you gonna get your natural gas out if you can't get it out through um, uh, traditional, regular route lines through southeastern Europe, or through the Arctic, or through the Nordic uh, 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 sea passages. Then you have to go. Yeah, you have to go through the Caucasus, or you have to go through the Pacific, and for them to establish um, route lines coming out of the Pacific will cost them, or over the Arctic and the Northeast
right.
Passage is going to cost them billions and trillions. I mean, it's just going to be a massive, massive
Right. And
expenditure,
ever
and
well, and
and it's
China
just not
has
going to
been,
happen.
yeah, and China's already
And
kind of eyeing
Yeah,
that as a
China's already said we don't want it.
yeah,
China said we will not contribute to that expenditure. So
yeah.
the only thing that really lies for Russia is if the Northeast Passage and the Arctic warms up enough that they have a year round.
And then China wants that though.
And
So China, you want to
yeah,
talk about like
yeah,
punching a hole in the
yeah,
fucking country? Like we've talked about this before, where China started renaming cities that were taken during the Sino-Russian War on their maps as a fuck you to Putin, while they're supposedly having this great friendship. Well, that's right in the middle of the country. That is basically between the Moskva kind of section and Siberia. It's right through there. Well, if you were going to build, I'm just saying, if you were going to build a series of train lines up to the fucking ocean where that through that thaw you could ship things over the top of the globe or around the Arctic as a way of shortening your travel time for goods and services into Canada and other countries, you could basically get them to almost everywhere in the world over the top because it shortened your distance. Um, it, why would they wait for permission from Russia? I mean, that land would be more
yeah.
valuable to them than Taiwan ever could be. And it used to be theirs at one point during, the Mongolian times or whatever. If you want to, if they all things being equal, this assumption that all Asian people in that section of the world are all magically Chinese over history somehow, which they clearly are not. But for these purposes, so are the Uyghurs at this point. So are the like Eastern European looking Turkish people are Chinese for all practical purposes. Certainly enough for land seizure is the point. So and again, what happens though? You do all that. You basically go to a minor economic or physical war. You get some concessions from Putin in a way to salvage himself, and you give away the center of the country. And I don't know what the fuck happens to Siberia. Just North Korea can have it and use it for snow farms. But in the middle of it, China punches its way through to the center of this, gains this trade route right at the time when no one in the world will need, by the time this happens, Chinese production anymore.
Yes. Well, by the time the Northeast Passage actually opens up and you get a trade route from Asia to Europe across the Arctic shelf, by the time that actually is viable, when global warming happens, and that's not if you're
Yeah,
Moscow, you're lucky. You're lucky if that happens in 10 years,
right.
sort of thing. But by the time that happens, we're already going to start to wean ourselves off of fossil fuels.
Right. And the
So
rest of us are going to try to put a
you're
stop
looking,
to it because we're trying to, shorten supply lines. We're trying to make stuff more, in line with the environment. All the Western societies, which are the big consumer base in the world, recognize that we use, an outside amount of the energy in the world. We consume a lot of the consumables. So therefore, we should play a better part in making them, the environmental impact of those things, safer and better for everyone. And as those efforts proceed, that is on a trajectory, a collision course with this production domination hegemony idea that the Chinese have for, being the world's factory, which is, I would argue, already effectively dead. It just doesn't know it
yeah,
yet. And the Russians are never going to be that thing. So again, if Russia just decided, fuck this, we're done with war, we apologize, our bad, we're going to, string Putin up in the middle of the Kremlin Square. We got a new, Alexei Navalny type guy who wants just Russia to be a big European state. It's still going to be 20 fucking years
yeah.
before they produce anything worth a goddamn. Their economy's still the size of Italy's, and nobody's going to believe them. No one is going.
Yeah.
Why would you? Why would you trust them? It's so
And what do
weird.
they have to sell? What do they
Right.
have to sell? If they don't have
Oil
to
and
sell
gas.
fossil fuels, if they're
Right.
not selling fossil fuels, and if they're not trying to sell fossil fuels coming from their Far East across the Arctic shelf, or God forbid, they continue to try and use the current trade routes, which goes down through the Straits of Hormuz and up through
Right.
Suez. It's still going to be a catastrophe for them. It's not
Right.
viable.
No.
So they're not going to
Uh,
make a lot of if they're not sending stuff directly from the east to the west via Ukraine primarily, but also like Poland and the Baltics. They're screwed. And it's look, Russia is, whether they like it or not, and they don't like it.
right.
Uh, they're a weaning power. They're
Yeah.
not able to be effective as a trading partner, as a massive, kind of economic bloc that tries to send its goods either east or west.
Right.
It's not going to work for them. They're screwed. Russia
Yeah.
as an empire is really quickly
Yeah.
collapsing, and this
Well,
war is
I
part of
liken
that.
them. I liken them to a drug dealer. If you like drugs and you buy drugs from a guy, and having never done drugs, to understand the limitations of my ability to make an analogy out of this, but see where I'm going with this. And then he starts selling you fentanyl-laced stuff that starts killing some of your buddies at the party. You're going to find another drug dealer, even if you're going to still use drugs. If it hasn't scared you off the idea of being too paranoid to use drugs again because a couple of your friends thought they were taking one drug and end up dying of another. And that's where, like, as far as trade in the world, Russia is currently. And I don't think you can make an entire economy just dumping your used military gear on Africa, which and the Middle East, which is what, I mean,
Hmm.
in large part, that's one of the reasons why they wanted to trade that fucking God of War dude for Brittany Griner, was because one of their secondary cottage industries, one of the things that they keeps them afloat
Is the
is
military industrial.
is
Yeah.
yes, selling both new and used,
Sukhois
um
and
yeah,
crappy
and
old
clis-
tanks and yeah.
and rifles, just rifles everywhere. Like, you look all over Africa, you look all over the Middle East. If
Mm,
there's some shit going down, they're carrying Kalashnikovs. They're carrying
yeah.
AK-47s. Um, and that's not an accident. Those are Wagner brokers down there with fucking crates of those sons of bitches, and a bunch of them are left over from the Cold War, but they make new, fresh ones all the time, so
Yeah.
they sell them. They dump them there at low cost, so that, like, the Sudanese fight that's going on, there's AK-47s on both sides of that thing. So that should tell you something about where both sides are getting armed and who's paying for both sides of that. And what's happening while that's happening? Trucks full of fucking gold are being driven out of Darfur and northern Sudan by Wagner
Mhm.
mercs, and all of it ends up in Russia. It's not even a question. And so why the fuck would you let them? I don't even know why we'd let them have an embassy here at this point. It's yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, to go with your drug analogy, the guy on the street corner has an AK-47. He's got he's got a crate full of AK-47s. But in
Hmm.
order to get AK-47s to the street corner, there's a trade route that is
Yes.
becoming increasingly and increasingly expensive.
Hmm.
So your drug dealer on the street corner is going to make his cost increasing, and also the product is not going to be as good as it used
Well,
to be.
that's
So it
right.
it's just
Well, that's the
it's
Chinese dumping.
all
So
collapsing.
yeah, so the Chinese market has these knockoffs of, like, M4s
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
AK-47, or sorry, M16s, effectively, like their variation of the modern M16 and the M4. And then they have a knockoff of the AR-15 that they sell to Russia as a sporting rifle with a full automation kit that they sell to them, because they're not allowed to sell them military weapons, but they can sell them hunting rifles. And technically, and thanks to the the fucking NRA in the United States, the AR-15 is a hunting rifle technically, because it's single shot, right? But you can modify it. So that's China uses that American-made loophole to dump these guns into there. But they do the same thing. They make way more than they need and dump them, because the return on investment is not the I made this gun for $35. I'm selling it for $110 and therefore profit. They dump them there because the destabilization of those areas has a value in and of itself. And
Hmm.
say what you will about the American military, but there's always been this weird pushback that if we see weapons coming back our way that have our markings on them, it's a big fucking deal. If our soldiers run into in the field somebody, pointing, an M4 at you or an American-made sniper rifle, there's a big what the fuck in the Pentagon. Like, how'd this stuff go? Who's selling it? Where'd it get stolen from? Is it, because sometimes trucks get stolen, all that kind of stuff. Or I'm sure there's some graft going on a minor level in places all the time, but it becomes a scandal. There's no even limit on it when it comes to Russian and Chinese weapons. They just fucking show up and go
Yeah.
clack and just dump the shit on the ground and go have at it. Because ultimately what they want is not the difficult gray area of two groups maybe fighting against each other. They want the area cleared. They don't give a rat fuck who dies or who wins. Yeah.
And they want to have the market. So they create the market.
Right.
So, it's in their
Ugh.
benefit to keep selling weapons or human trafficking or whatever it is. They develop they develop the market to produce the commerce. And
Right.
so you're going to have that. And until their sense of empire and their sense of, expanding criminal activity and sales that they can benefit from no matter what.
Right.
And that includes drugs. Like the opium trade coming out of Afghanistan, and
Right.
they don't give a rat's ass.
Well, it's like, I
The
would make a
Yeah.
like the CIA stuff that we talk about sometimes, how like the CIA is kind of the perfect foil for all the Alex Joneses of the world because there's an
Mm,
element of secrecy to it. But every time we have, like you and I know about Iran-Contra, or you and I both know about like, drug trafficking around Cambodia, around the Vietnam War. And the reason we know about that is because it's a scandal. It matters to the voter. It has changed the
yeah.
course of people's support for the war in Vietnam, specifically those kind of stories. They are, there's some, gangsta like Air America kind of movies that were made about the people that did this, but it's done with a wink and a nod. And the protagonist is always like ashamed of what they're doing and holy shit, this is terrible and blah, blah, blah. There's none of that with Russia.
Mm.
They do it gladly and proudly. They're impressed by it. And I think that's the distinction that people need to recognize is that there's as long as even the Trumps of the world, as long as they remain slightly ashamed or embarrassed by these things, you're in a much better space than you are with the Putins of the world or Xi Jinping or those crowd who are like, we can't get this stuff into the hands of as many people fast enough. And if they kill a bunch of civilians with our rifles, there's no shame in that. Once they're in their hands, that they're animals. Like it is the abject racism of all
Well,
of it. It's
yeah, and it
amazing.
kind of used to be as well. I mean, the fact that we couldn't, if you were an American company,
Hmm.
you could not you couldn't be part of like a bribery,
Yeah. Right.
and that's gone.
Yeah.
The Trump administration has removed
Right.
the restrictions on American companies doing illicit trade, which
Hmm.
is to say bribery. And so we can, our American industry can now conduct itself in criminal activity globally, which we weren't able to do previously.
Right.
And that's going to be a problem. That's going to be a
Right.
real big problem eventually.
Yeah.
We might get a little sugar rush. We might get a little, kind of like a boost from the immediate
Well, that's all he
terms
needs,
of
though.
being,
In
yeah,
global
that's all it
terms,
needs.
that's like
Yeah,
he needs 2 years of it. He needs a sugar rush to get him through the midterms. That's what he's shooting for.
yeah,
After that, it's all sales all the time because once he's a lame duck, it's about
yeah,
like padding his pockets, and then his whole family will be moving overseas. They're going to live in parts of Europe or in the Middle East. They're going to probably spend most of the time in Dubai or fuck. At this point, I wouldn't be surprised if he set up a Trump Tower on Little St. James Island. Capable Glober in there said, what about kind of like liquor store and gun shop at every corner in urban areas in the U.S.? There was a huge proliferation of those things specifically especially in the mid to late 80s. The number of gun stores in the United States have actually gone down, and the guns that actually are sold that are involved in crimes don't go through a gun store. They're not even straw purchases. Most of them, especially in Chicago, which has very strong rules, are driven across the border from places like St. Louis or in from Indiana, and they're bought, they're 3-tiered down or they're stolen or those kind of things. That's an entirely different industry. And insofar as like liquor, in Kentucky, shit, liquor's not the problem. You could buy fucking bath salts at a gas station. Like, as far as them trying to, I think they gave up on let's let them shoot each other and clear out the ghettos mentality that might have been around mid 60s to the mid 80s or something like that. Has been just like, legalize drugs and let fentanyl do its thing. And then when it gets to be too much, then we'll pull it back. I mean, you could argue that Portland was trying to do a good thing by legalizing drugs and trying to help people and all this kind of stuff. But since they didn't push them into programs, all it amounted to was overdose deaths went up like 900%. And people just, even with Narcan available everywhere, people just fucking died. So at a certain point, you made a huge mistake and you go, you know what? That's a terrible idea and we're never doing that again. Or you meant to do it and you're like, well, we tried, but, we'll try something else next time. When in reality, you just wanted to fucking purge people by, get rid of a junkie by feeding him, an overdose. It's like a terrible idea. So that said, nowhere near let's look at liquor stores, alcoholism in Russia, for example. Holy shit. Like, and now guns used to not be a problem in Russia. They really didn't. Like there's strict, that's why the NRA alliance with them was so weird. But, because what was it? If you went hunting and you bought 10 bullets, you better come back with 8 bullets and 2 shell casings if you fired 2 shots. And there's all these rules about you have to own a rifle for 5 years before you get a license for a handgun, and even only obviously rich fuckers were allowed to do that, and their security forces. But they could be taken away by the government without any reason at any time. So I don't know how the NRA is like beating their chest about fucking Russia. In the Middle East, I struggle to find pictures of like Houthi fighters or ISIS fighters in that region of the world that don't have a big wad of khat in their mouth, which is this stimulant that, it's the Pervitin of the Middle East. It's what the Nazis took. It's like a cross between meth and chewing tobacco. You just keep it in there and you just suck on. They have these big, you ever see pictures of people? They look like they just had their wisdom teeth out. There's this huge wad or whatever. Okay, that's a drug called khat, and it's everywhere. And while everything else is illegal, all the Western drugs or the Asian drugs, which is what they consider heroin to be, opiates, those are all legal. Those are all illegal. Khat is completely legal. And you just, what the fucking big deal? There's a version of it, a lighter version in China. And you see it more in Taiwan, actually, called Bin Lan. Bin Lan is this, like, you take this Bin Lan nut it's like a stimulant and a believed to be a slight aphrodisiac, and they wrap it in the leaf or whatever, and they sell them on the street, and you chew on the thing all day long, and truckers pick them up, and they have these what are called Bin Lan girls because there's no difference between the product. They're all the same drug. They have these girls that sit in these little booths in short skirts along the road on these truck routes, and they sell Bin Lan. All they do is sit there all day just wrapping these seeds in leaves, and they sell them, in little packets or whatever. And so guys roll up, and so you basically stop because you're flirting with your favorite Bin Lan girl just to buy it because there's zero difference in the product. The Middle East is full of khat in the same way, just without the women. Now they use boys. Boys will carry around the khat and deliver it. So draw your own conclusions. But it's the same. It's men being men in the most awful sense. But all of them, big chunk of khat in their cheek, AK-47. Like,
Yeah.
And at some point, there's got to be a remedy around that. There's got to be a pushback. Like, hey, who the fuck is dumping all these guns? Because it's not like they can afford them. You know, the UN's having to drop food off to a lot of these folks, even the fighters in these areas, and yet they're supposedly buying truckloads of these fucking and the ammunition. That's the other thing too.